I played the demo for Alone in the Dark on PlayStation 5. While I know the series' history, I was not sure what to expect with this new reboot. As an avid survival horror fan, I am of course familiar with the series, having played the original trilogy on PC and the various reboots on PS1, PS3, and later PC again. The original Alone in the Dark released in 1992 by Infogrames. It was an ambitious title far ahead of its time with 3D polygonal characters, pre-rendered backgrounds, and cinematic camera angles. While I appreciate its pivotal historical contribution to creating the survival horror genre and the low-poly look is enjoying a resurgence in the indie scene, I find it less approachable due to the awkward controls. The original game introduced the choice of picking one of two protagonists, Edward Carnby and Emily Hartwood. Set in the 1920s Louisiana, the game has the player exploring Derceto Manor, reading notes from Emily's uncle, solving puzzles, and fighting monsters. The game's creator, Friedrich Renahl, left Infogrames, and the series moved into a more comical direction with Jack in the Dark and the two sequel games. Jack in the Dark served as a light-hearted playable demo for the sequel. Notably, it starred Grace Saunders, the protagonist of the Prologue demo for the newest reboot coming out in January. It was a brief but light-hearted experience about Grace exploring a toy shop at night. The toys come to life and she solves puzzles to stop a Jack-in-the-Box version of One-Eyed Jack and to free Santa Claus. I really enjoyed it since it removed the worst aspects of the original games, namely the platforming and combat. Alone in the Dark 2 saw Edward Carnby fighting pirates and gangsters while attempting to rescue Grace. The final game in the original trilogy finds Edward Carnby battling cowboy zombies to rescue Emily Hartwood. While the series made improvements to the fluidity of Carnby's movements, the combat control system is clunky and imprecise. The entire trilogy released prior to the first Resident Evil game. The first reboot game, Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare, developed by Darkworks for the original PlayStation, moved the setting to the then present day. In terms of controls, the gameplay feels similar to Resident Evil. This time a descendant named after the original Edward Carnby acts as more of a paranormal action hero rather than an ordinary investigator pulled into an occult, Lovecraftian world. While I appreciate games in the genre, the overall experience pales in comparison to other titles released around the same time, such as the Resident Evil series and Silent Hill. A port to the Nintendo Game Boy Color stands out as graphically impressive for the platform and time. The 2008 reboot, initially simply titled as Alone in the Dark, and later revised as Alone in the Dark Inferno on the PlayStation 3, attempted to blend a multitude of unusual game mechanics with both first-person shooting and third-person melee action and platforming with awkward driving sequences. While I liked the TV show style chapters and the coat-based inventory selection system, I found the game to be unintuitive and buggy to the point of frustration. In 2015, Pure FPS developed the most recent entry in the series, Alone in the Dark: Illumination. This game initially lacked story elements, which were later added as narration a year later. Inspired by the Left 4 Dead series and Resident Evil 6, the game focuses on 4-player multiplayer combat against waves of monsters in a current-day setting. While the narration identifies the characters as descendants of Carnby, Hartwood, and Saunders, the game overall lacks originality and any mystery or charm from the original game. I went into the PlayStation 5 demo not knowing what to expect. Pisces Interactive returns to Alone in the Dark to tell a reimagining of the original game's 1920 Southern Gothic horror story. The Prologue demo centers on Grace Saunders exploring Derceto Manor. With a doom jazz soundtrack and period-accurate detailed graphics, the Prologue demo succeeds in capturing the atmosphere and time period. Grace moves smoothly through the hallways in what feels like almost a dream state. She meets a frantic Jeremy Hartwood, who is trying to contact his niece Emily. Grace volunteers to mail a letter to her. A sudden shift places her in danger from eldritch creatures. With a bit of fearless ingenuity, she survives to complete her mission and set the stage for the full game to launch January 16th next year. While the demo is short and does not include any combat, I am very optimistic that the newest reboot will finally pay proper tribute to one of the most influential games in the history of the survival horror genre. I'm excited that David Harbour and Jodie Comer are set to star as Edward Carnby and Emily Hartwood. On the official website, I watched an interview with the original game's creator, Friedrich Renal, who praised the team who have worked to capture the spirit of Alone in the Dark. I am looking forward to returning to Derceto Manor in 2024, and I hope you are too. Thanks for tuning in.